Thank you. Senator Hawley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, it's great to have this hearing. Thanks for calling it. Thanks to all of our witnesses for being here. Professor Shaw, nice to see you again. Let me just start with you, if I could, Professor Shaw. You talked about the fact that there have been lots of rulings against the Trump administration. That's absolutely statistically true. I disagree with almost all of them. In fact, I think all of them. But the issue of this hearing really isn't the rulings, is it? It's the remedies. Would you agree? And those are distinct things. You may think that the ruling is quite correct, but that's actually not what we're talking about here today. We could have a hearing on that. Maybe we should. But we're talking today about the remedy. And the question is a remedy that binds parties who are not before the court, is that an appropriate thing? I mean, aren't you concerned about judges binding non-parties in their remedies? You may love the ruling, but even if you do, don't you think it's a little bit anomalous for courts to be going out there and binding parties who are not before them? I mean, is that something we want to encourage?
Welcome back to the Constitution Corner, where we cut through the media noise and expose what's really happening in Washington. If you care about the Constitution, the rule of law, and the survival of our republic, hit that like button and subscribe right now. We're bringing you the truth the mainstream media refuses to cover.
Senator, I think that judges have been issuing rulings that impact non-parties since Marbury versus Madison, right?
So you're not concerned about it?
I'm not. I absolutely think that they can be abused, and they have been abused.
Wait a minute. You were very concerned about it just a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
You said in response to a nationwide injunction on the Biden FDA's mifepristone rules, and I quote, "This injunction's a travesty for principles of democracy, notions of judicial impartiality, and the rule of law."
I think I've been consistent today. That was issued by Judge Kaczmarek in a single judge division. They're a problem. Those are a problem.
With him personally? Wait.
No.
So your testimony is if it's issued by Judge Kaczmarek, it's bad?
No, sir.
It's personal?
That is not my testimony.
Is the problem with the injunction? You were criticizing the universal injunction
issued by a judge in a single judge division. I've been very clear today that those are a problem.
By a Republican judge in a Republican division, then it's bad.
No, Senator.
Otherwise, it's fine.
No, Senator. I think that single judge divisions are a problem.
What is the principal difference? I'm looking for a principle. I understand you hate the president. I understand you love all of these rulings against him. You and I both know that's not a principle. You're a lawyer. What's the principle that divides when issuing a nationwide injunction is okay when it's not? When the Biden administration was subject to nationwide injunctions, you said that they were travesties for the principle of democracy. You didn't say the referral to Judge Kaczmarek was a travesty. You said his injunction was a travesty for principles of democracy. Yeah. So, in other words, the translation is just you didn't like the outcome. Is that right?
No, Senator. Look, we're talking about, I don't think Article 3 precludes this form of relief. So we are talking about prudential consideration.
Prudential meaning political?
No.
Then give me, so far I have yet to hear it. You've been questioned by multiple senators. I have yet to hear a principle other than the fact when you like the ruling, you think it's great to apply it nationally, including non-parties. When you don't like the ruling, it is a travesty for the principles of democracy, notions of judicial impartiality, and the rule of law.
Look, Senator, I'll say I think I am self-aware enough to know that my view of the underlying legal question, I am sure colors my perception of the remedy. I think that we should all acknowledge that. And yet I do think
why shouldn't we stop nationwide injunctions for everybody?
I think
That's what we're talking about today.
Because I'm not willing to leave without relief non-parties who are injured.
No, you're not willing to leave without the ability to bind President Trump.
No, I think that...
I mean, when it's Biden, it's okay. No. When it's Biden, it's a travesty. When it's Trump in office, it's no holds barred, whatever it takes, right?
I believe in a powerful...
What was it that President Biden's staff said? We've got to do undemocratic, unconstitutional things to save democracy. Why is this the same
I believe in a powerful president. I do believe in presidential power, but power and constraint are not at fundamental odds.
What is the principle? What is the principle? The legal principle. You've referenced prudence. You've referenced the judges you don't like. What's the principle of when an injunction binding non-parties, which was never done in this country before the 1960s? And let's see the chart, the Trump chart, which was done really only once Trump came into office for the first time. You don't think this is a little bit anomalous? You don't think that's a little bit strange?
A very plausible explanation, Senator, you have to consider is that he is engaged in much more lawless activity than other presidents, right?
You don't think this was never used before the 1960s, and suddenly Democrat judges decide we love the nationwide injunction, and then when Biden comes to office, no, actually.
It's Republican appointees as well, Senator, and the 1960s is where some scholars locate the beginning of this, but others,
one before then?
Mila Sahoni, who's another scholar, scholar of universal injunction suggests 1913 is actually the first, and others in the 20s.
The Republic endured for 150 years before there was a nationwide injunction.
Well, the federal government was doing a lot less until 100 years ago. So there's many things that have changed in the last 100 or the last 50 years.
So long as it is a Democrat president in office, then we should have no nationwide injunctions. If it's a Republican president, then this is absolutely fine, warranted, and called for. How can our system of law survive on those principles, Professor?
I think a system in which there are no meaningful constraints on the president is a very dangerous system of law.
That's not what you thought when Joe Biden. That is not what you thought when Joe Biden was
every president.
You said that is not what you said. You said it was a travesty for the principles of democracy, notions of judicial impartiality, and the rule of law. You also said
the Supreme Court senator agreed 9-0 with me on that.
You also said when Joe Biden was president, you said the idea that anyone would foreign shop to get a judge who would issue a nationwide injunction was just judges looking like politicians in robes. Again, it threatened the underlying legal system. People just trying to get the result they wanted. It was a travesty for the rule of law. But you're fine with all of that if it's getting the result that you want.
Sir, the Supreme Court agreed unanimously with me in that case, right? There was no standing. The case should never have been allowed to proceed. And the combination of parties without standing and the single judge division.
We're talking. No, they did not. They did not issue a ruling on the nationwide injunction. You criticized the injunction nationwide. Listen,
issued in a case where no one had standing.
Here's the thing. We've now gone 6 minutes, and Senator Kennedy had you for 6 or 7. You couldn't identify a single principled basis. We all know the truth here, which is it's not just you. It's most of my colleagues over here on this side of the aisle, who I respect a great deal, and they were raising very principled objections to the nationwide injunction just 6 months ago, maybe 9 now. And you're probably right. My point is that all that's changed in 9 months is the occupant of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And I realize that my colleagues on this side of the aisle very much dislike that individual, and I realize that you think that the rulings that he has lost are fundamentally sound. We might grant all of that. I disagree with all of that, but we can put that to one side. The question we're talking about here is, should judges, single judges, district court judges, be able to bind non-parties who are not in front of them? And you used to say no, now you say yes. Let's be consistent. I would just suggest to you our system of government cannot survive if it's going to be politics all the way down. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Can I briefly respond?
Sure.
I mean, you invoked democracy a couple of times there, Senator. Judges are part of our system of democracy. Democracy is not as simple as majority rule. Judges have always served something of a
You would have it be as simple as majority rule. When you get the majority you like, you're for the nationwide injunction. When you don't, you're not.
Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to give you the opportunity that I often found absolutely precious when
Today we're reacting to a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing that laid bare the judicial hypocrisy infecting our legal system. And Senator Josh Hawley absolutely tore the mask off one of the liberal witnesses, Professor Shah, in a brilliant cross-examination that every American needs to hear. Now, if you missed the hearing, don't worry, we've got it covered. Senator Hawley confronted a deeply biased legal scholar about her flip-flopping stance on nationwide injunctions, and folks, it was a masterclass in exposing the two-tiered system of justice. Let's talk facts. Nationwide injunctions, those are court orders that apply not just to the parties in a lawsuit but to everyone in the country. Historically, courts didn't use this kind of sweeping power. It wasn't until the 1960s, during the rise of activist liberal judges, that this tool started being used more frequently. But under President Trump, it became the left's favorite weapon to stop him from enforcing laws that Congress had passed and policies the American people voted for. Hawley grilled Professor Shah on one simple question. What is the principle? What separates a legitimate injunction from judicial overreach? And the answer? Crickets. The professor could not name a single principle. All she had were opinions that magically lined up with the political outcome she favored. When Trump was president, she thought nationwide injunctions were fantastic. What? Because they stopped him from doing what voters elected him to do. But when Biden took over and those same legal tools were used to check his power, suddenly it was a travesty for democracy. That's not legal scholarship. That's partisanship in a robe. And Hawley saw right through it. He even quoted her past statements, word for word, where she condemned the exact same kind of injunctions she now defends. And when pushed, she admitted her views on the ruling color, her views on the remedy. Translation: if I like the outcome, the process doesn't matter. Let me tell you something, folks. That's not how the rule of law works. The rule of law isn't about liking the outcome. It's about having a consistent set of rules that apply equally, no matter who's in power. That's what makes America different. That's what makes America free. But these legal elites don't care about consistency. They don't care about constitutional limits. All they care about is power, and keeping it out of the hands of the people who elected Donald J. Trump. Senator Hawley laid it out plain and simple. For over 150 years, this kind of injunction wasn't even part of our judicial toolbox. Then, when Trump comes to power, suddenly liberal judges and scholars find a whole new affection for it, because it lets unelected, unaccountable district court judges freeze the policies of a sitting president. That's not democracy. That's a judicial coup. And when Hawley demanded a principle, just one, that would explain when and why it's appropriate to bind nonpartists to a lawsuit, Professor Shaw had nothing. She danced, she dodged, she tried to change the subject, but Hawley wouldn't let her off the hook. And by the end, she admitted what we already knew. This is about politics, plain and simple. She said Trump was uniquely lawless. That's their excuse. That's how they justify throwing out 200 years of precedent and rewriting constitutional norms, because they don't like him. But folks, our legal system doesn't work that way. You don't rewrite the Constitution because of your personal feelings about the man in the White House. If you're okay with courts blocking lawful executive action under one president, you better be okay with them doing the same under another. Otherwise, you're not for the rule of law. You're for rule by your political party, and that's dangerous. Senator Hawley wasn't just questioning one professor. He was exposing an entire left-wing strategy to paralyze conservative governance, no matter how many elections they lose. It's judicial tyranny. And if we want to restore the Constitution, we need to end the abuse of nationwide injunctions, completely. Here's the bottom line. If a case comes before a judge, the ruling should only apply to the parties involved, not the entire nation. That's how Article 3 of the Constitution was written. The courts are not super legislatures. They're supposed to interpret the law, not write national policy from the bench. Senator Hawley is right. Our government can't survive if it's politics all the way down. We need a principled judiciary, not a partisan one. That's why we're speaking out here at the Constitution Corner. Because if we don't expose this hypocrisy, no one will. Like this video. Share it with every patriot you know. Subscribe to the Constitution Corner. And let's keep the fight going, for the Constitution, for the rule of law, and for America. Because if we lose this battle, there may not be another one. We are the Constitution Corner, where Americans' root guides its future. Until next time, stand strong, speak truth, and may God bless the United States of America.